Thank you, President D'Annunzio and trustees. Let me begin tonight's Return to Campus presentation by thanking our teachers, support staff, and administrators for all of their efforts in providing the best distance learning program we can for our students and families. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge and express appreciation for the positive relationships and ongoing collaboration with our labor associations. These are challenging times, and maintaining strong partnerships is key to providing the best outcomes. As we'll hear tonight, this week, Yolo County COVID-19 rates have placed the county in Tier 2, also known as the substantial or red tier. We're carefully watching to see if our county remains in Tier 2 for the required period of 14 consecutive days, which would eventually permit us to return to in-person learning with the right measures and restrictions in place to protect the health and safety of students and staff. I want to underscore the incredibly serious nature of this situation and how critical a moment this is for our district and our community. We must get this right, and we're moving cautiously and deliberately. Our leadership team has guided our district through many difficult situations in the past years, including threats to campus, school cancellations for smoke, the norovirus, power outages, staff, student, and family member death and death by suicide, student walkouts, and more. We've successfully navigated past crises through purposeful crisis protocols and postvention plans, establishing facts, providing clear and transparent communication to all stakeholders in a coordinated and timely manner, and all the while ensuring student and staff health and safety remain at the center of our work. As you'll hear tonight, we're taking a measured, phased approach to the gradual return to campus and are planning for the long-term health and safety of staff and of students in our care. In addition, we're working closely with the Yolo County Public Health Department, Yolo County Office of Education, City of Davis, and UC Davis. We're also developing another round of stakeholder outreach, including a return to campus survey for families and staff, as well as student focus group feedback. All of this feedback, along with data from the county, will be important information to inform our work ahead. Next slide, please. We're thinking purposefully and strategically about the task ahead. Our actions have been rooted in our values, specifically in the 6 principles that continue to guide our decision-making process and our work. These are the principles of equity, and by that we mean recognizing and assessing individual student needs and providing the right resources to meet goals. Access, meaning how we can provide equitable opportunities for students to take full advantage of educational offerings and close the digital divide. Innovation, taking risks, exploring multiple possibilities, challenging the status quo, and seeking to continually improve processes and outcomes. By the principle of continuity, which keeps us focused on the progression of learning even while school campuses are closed. The principle of compatibility, ensuring that learning and the integrity of systems can be maintained, even if the model for instruction transitions, changes, and efficacy, designing measures for our desired outcomes for teaching and learning. These 6 principles proved successful in informing our work in the spring, and especially over the summer and fall for distance learning. They will continue to guide us as we prepare steps for our next phases in our return to campus plan. You'll hear more tonight about this ongoing work. As local community COVID-19 spread continues to drop, DJUSD is entering phase 2 of our return to campus plan by methodically and predictably beginning to implement our health and staffing plans to safely bring students with the most urgent needs to campus first. At the same time, we're carefully monitoring the COVID-19 rates for Yolo County and developing plans for a possible phase 3 hybrid model that will include on and off campus instruction for all students. Next slide, please. Let me now turn the presentation over to Associate Superintendent of Student Support Services, Laura Juanitas.
Thank you, Dr. Bose, and good evening, trustees. I want to begin by revisiting the framework for how we continue to make decisions related to serving students. As a district, we must pay close attention to the health in our community and work closely with the Yolo County Public Health Department regarding any plans to reopen. We must prepare our sites and provide ongoing health and safety training to staff and our families so that they feel comfortable returning to in-person instruction. Lastly, we must always keep in mind that we have some students who are struggling greatly during distance learning, and it is a priority that we bring them back onto campus for in-person instruction. The state's blueprint for reopening tracks two metrics: the 7-day daily case rate and the 7-day testing positivity rate. For the week ending September 28th, Yolo County's rate for daily cases was 3.1 and testing positivity was 2.5%. To move into the red or substantial tier, counties must meet a daily case rate of between 4 and 7 and a positivity rate of between 5 and 8%. Although our numbers actually qualify us for the orange or moderate tier, we can only move one tier at a time, and therefore Yolo County was moved into the red tier on September 29th. To advance further, we must remain in the red tier for a minimum of 3 weeks, and before advancing, we must meet the orange tier criteria for the prior 2 consecutive weeks in both measures. If we maintain a 7-day average case rate below 3.9 and a 7-day testing positivity rate less than 4.9% over the next 3 weeks, we'll be able to move into the orange tier on October 19th. It's important to note that during the weekly assessment by the state, if a county's adjusted case rate or their test positivity rate has fallen into a more restrictive tier for 2 consecutive weekly periods, the county must revert to the more restrictive tier. So we can go backwards as well as forwards. Although you will see many businesses in Yolo County reopening in the coming weeks, schools have an additional restriction in that they must remain in the red tier for 14 consecutive days before they're allowed to begin reopening for widespread in-person instruction. When looking at Yolo County's most recent data on September 30th, we had 10 new cases reported, and our test positivity rate for September 16th through the 22nd was 3.07%. As you can see at the graph on the right, the county has experienced a steady decline in new cases since our recent high in August. Next slide, please. So our current plan for returning to campus in phase 2 entails serving students with urgent needs first. This can occur even before we've been in the red tier for 14 consecutive days, but it will still require a thoughtful, measured return that considers local health data from the county, the confidence of staff and parents that our school sites are prepared, and that our contact tracing and testing program is working well. It's a delicate balancing act that must continue to take into account health, safety, and service to our students. We also have to make these difficult decisions with the backdrop that we are a university town that's had an influx of over 10,000 students in the past month. We want to reopen and be able to stay open and not have to close due to rising infection rates. This week, I want to provide you specifics on the progress we've been making in the last 2 weeks to bring students back onto campus. For step 1, we plan to conduct special education assessments in person. This will happen at the Valley Oak campus, Birch Lane Elementary School, Holmes Junior High School, and Davis Senior High School. The focus will be to complete initial and triennial assessments, which require in-person testing to be valid. We will also prioritize assessments for students who are currently receiving special education services, but have an identified need to change those services. Annual special education meetings that do not require in-person assessment can be done virtually with the IEP team and the family. And in fact, we have conducted 339 IEP meetings since last March, which includes evaluating progress on goals and updating the IEP services as needed. So in order to begin conducting in-person assessments, we have received and deployed PPE to staff, We have purchased iPads and software that will enable the assessor to replicate what had been done pre-COVID with paper and pencil. This includes turning pages, pointing to a section the student needs to complete, circling an item, etc. It's going to allow the assessor to maintain social distance while still assisting the student with the assessment process. We have also finalized our health assessments and wellness screening questions, our disinfecting protocols, and contact tracing procedures. Currently, we are training the nursing and special education department staff on the new protocols. We will begin the scheduling process next week with a plan to begin assessments the week of October 12th. I am also developing training for students and parents regarding safety measures when they come back onto campus. And we are identifying the rooms that will be used at the 4 campuses and setting those up to begin in-person assessments. Once the in-person assessments begin, we can begin to move to step 2, which is to provide specialized services on campus. We're going to use the same 4 sites and we'll prioritize services that are difficult to do remotely, such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language services, educationally related mental health, and adaptive PE. We have a large number of students who receive these services weekly, and we will focus first on the students with the most urgent need. This could be our youngest students who have difficulty accessing services remotely, students that have a large number of specialized services, or students whose disability makes receiving any kind of service difficult in a virtual format. We have begun working with the individual specialties to identify and procure additional PPE to enhance safety. And since these services will be provided at the same 4 sites where we are providing in-person special education assessments, there will be a nurse present to conduct wellness checks prior to the appointments. Key tasks remaining is that we're identifying the staff who are able to provide the services in person, and again, we'll begin the scheduling process next week. We're also working with our special education transportation company to provide bus service for the students who will need it. So step 3 requires identifying discrete cohorts of 16 or less students and staff combined who were unable to access their education through distance learning. Our initial plan is to continue to hold these cohorts at the 4 identified campuses, but we will need to evaluate whether additional campuses are needed. With more students coming onto campus for a full or a partial day, we have purchased 48 portable hand washing stations, which will be placed on campuses at the rooms being used by the cohorts. Key work that remains is to identify students who need to come back. This can include students receiving special education services through a special day class, which are already self-contained small groups of students with high needs. But in addition, we're working with sites to identify students who have not engaged in distance learning for a variety of reasons. This could be students with difficulty accessing their education due to language needs, home environment, or chronic issues with technology access. With more students coming onto campus in step 3, the nursing staff and I are developing parent training webinars to provide detailed information on the importance of wearing a face covering, frequent hand washing, social distancing, and how to assess a child for illness. The plan is to have 2 webinars in English and 1 in Spanish in mid-October. We'll videotape the trainings and post the information on the new Return to Campus website. In addition, we're working with secondary sites to provide a similar training directly to 7th through 12th grade students during their Wednesday advisory period. The work we're doing in steps 1 through 3 will lay the groundwork for bringing back more students to in-person learning over the coming months. It will give us the opportunity to prepare staff and students for a return and to feel confident that the infection rate in our county continues to remain low. And now I will turn this back to Superintendent Bose.
Thank you, Laura. Finally, tonight, I want to return to the 6 principles that have proven successful in informing our work in the spring, and especially over the summer and the fall for distance learning. These 6 principles continue to guide us as we prepare steps for the next phases in our return to campus plan. Let me now turn it back over to President D'Annunzio.
Thank you, Superintendent Bose. So to start, is there any public comment on this item?
We have 15 public comments.
Okay. So due to the large number of public comments, in the interest of time, all of them have been collected into a single PDF and attached to the board agenda item, which is publicly available at our agenda website. I'm going to go ahead and read the URL because I suspect some of you would like to see these, probably all of you. So it's www.djusd.net/about/governance/BOE, B as in board, /board meetings, board_meetings, or, you can Google DJUSD board meeting agendas and that'll probably get you there quicker. The Board of Education Superintendent have carefully read each email that have been shared with us, and we do that for every email. And I think I want to, add a comment that we appreciate hearing from the community. We have the opportunity to talk with people quite often, a little bit less in person given our current conditions. But the emails and communications that we receive from you are very important, and we're grateful for them. We review every one and we respond to them. And we thank you not just for your comments, but for your ideas and suggestions and questions. It's a really important part of community engagement. Okay, so now it's time for trustee comments or questions. And I'd like to start with Trustee Popengay, if I could, please.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, just a few questions or comments, maybe just more comments, I suppose. I do want to reiterate what President D'Annunzio said with regard to the parents that have reached out to us. We really appreciate that. Obviously we're in a very aware community, and a lot of people have shared scientific studies with us, and we certainly appreciate that. It's a little bit hard to sort of keep up with everything because the information can change weekly, if not daily. I just would like to comment after the presentation that I think it is appropriate to take it slow and be thoughtful about reopening. Certainly understand the stress that the parents are under, and particularly our children in terms of social and emotional health. Mentioning the new information that comes out on a regular basis. There was just an interesting study looking at children in terms of their positivity rate, and it actually is shockingly high. Fortunately, younger children and even up through high school or college are less affected by the COVID virus, but there is some information that children do serve to spread disease in the community. And actually children, even asymptomatic children, can be community spreaders and actually super shedders. And I think that's probably an important thing to keep in mind. The other thing that I think is very obvious if you're watching the national news is how many states are actually seeing an increase in cases. Fortunately, in California, we're going in the right direction, but there's significant concern about a second wave as we move into the fall. And I think the ideal positivity rate is 1% or less. And I think that allows, proper contact tracing and quarantine. So, we're still significantly above that, even though we're going in the right direction. I think the other thing that is hard to predict in Davis is the students coming back. I know the university has put in tremendous resources to beef up their testing. They're regularly testing students and not just symptomatic students, they're asymptomatically testing. And a lot of the universities that have been able to keep their positivity rate low are testing their students on a regular basis, perhaps even weekly. So I just feel like the information we're getting from different governmental agencies sort of plays down the need for testing asymptomatic people. And I just feel like that is more an issue of availability of tests and resources than scientifically based. There was a group out of Harvard that suggested if there's a positive individual, at least 10 other asymptomatic people should be tested, and that's just to mitigate the spread. It's not to drive down the cases. Even more testing should be done if you want to lower the positivity rate. So, I'm hoping with some of these more rapid tests, even though they're not quite as sensitive or specific, they look pretty promising, and they provide results within a matter of minutes, if not a couple of hours, as opposed to the more confirmatory PCR tests that I think we've at least gotten the turnaround times down a little bit. It's now not a week, but hopefully we're within a 48-hour window. So I'm not sure what the universities know that the rest of the community or the county doesn't know. If the university feels like it's important to control spread by testing asymptomatically on a regular basis, I just don't quite understand why there isn't more broad-based testing, particularly as we talk about going back to school. Just a couple of questions. Do you think it's about time to maybe ask the Yolo County Public Health individual to come back and give us an update? When is the new individual coming? They had hired a new MD, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, let me start, Laura, and then you can pick up where if I miss anything. Bob, I believe she's starting the third week of October, and we are inviting Yolo County Department of Public Health to our next board meeting on October 15th.
Okay.
And we feel that will be an important juncture point because we will know then if we have been or not in the red phase for the 14 consecutive day period. But we are planning on trying to have them at our next meeting. Okay.
And there's been some collaboration, at least discussions with UC Davis between the city and the district, and obviously UC Davis. Has anything changed over the last couple weeks since we talked last?
So I know the university has started testing on campus, is developing an app that they're launching to effectively track who's being tested. I am part of the city UCD advisory group, and our public information officer, Maria Clayton, is participating on the communications team. We're still waiting to hear about grant funding. So the work that's been developed that can then proceed. But the goal of the group is to safely open up the community of Davis in a safe and methodical manner, and they're trying to obtain, I think it's fair to say, significant resources, to prepare for that effort. And as you mentioned, some of it's already started as 5,000, 10,000 plus undergraduates are arriving on campus.
Yeah, I actually had a neighbor comment this past week about walking through some of the neighborhoods near the university and noticing quite a few students in large gatherings without a mask. So it'll be interesting to see over the next few weeks how UC Davis does in terms of controlling it. I think some universities have done a pretty good job. A lot of them have failed pretty miserably. So I think that's certainly something maybe unique to Davis, but it's something to keep an eye out for. And I guess I just have a question with regard to, sort of more qualitative in terms of teacher mental health. How are the teachers doing with regard to the stress and, just, the entire situation? Have you seen a change in the stress levels or?
Yeah, I think our teachers are working incredibly hard right now. They're learning a new student management system with Canvas. They're learning how to make distance learning engaging. they're really burning the candles at both ends. And we're seeing that and hearing that. And our staff usage of EAP services continues to rise. I think Matt reported on that a couple weeks ago that we're at like 18% utilizing those services, which is much higher than we used to be, and definitely much higher than many other large employers are. So people are very stressed, and you have this overlay of not quite knowing, are these good numbers that we're seeing this week? Is this going to continue, or will we have a second wave? We get new reports coming out, as you said, with students being silent spreaders of the virus. It's just there are so many things that they are having to juggle at the same time that they're wanting to keep themselves healthy, their families healthy, and provide excellent education to their students. So it's very, very difficult. And I think you add to that, nobody got a break over the summer.
Right. Yeah, I'm sort of curious to know from a teacher perspective, teaching virtually, have they been able to sort of identify students that are at risk or stressed? I just noticed a lot, and I understand it, a lot of the students did not have their video cameras on when they had the student focus groups. A lot of them did comment via the chat, which was great. But, when you can't really see the student at all, it just seems like it's incredibly hard to be able to identify a student under stress earlier rather than later.
Exactly. And I think a lot of teachers are really trying to employ all kinds of different creative ways to encourage students to have their cameras on. The reality is some kids are going to have them off because their home environment may not feel private enough. And so they may have younger siblings or other people walking around. So there's a lot of reasons why kids don't put their cameras on. Mm-hmm. I think plus it's especially at the junior high level, I think we probably see the biggest struggle there. And I know personally, I don't like looking at my reflection all day long. I can imagine a 12, 13, 14-year-old. That is pretty big lift to have your camera on. And even the most confident child, I think it's fatiguing. And so I think teachers are really trying to encourage it, be creative, but also understanding that kids are having their own struggles as well.
Right. And my last question, I'm sort of hogging the time here. With regard to teachers recording their lectures, and allowing students to go back and listen to it again, maybe in a better frame of mind or whatever, do you have some sense for how often that's occurring?
I don't have an actual statistic on that. I think some teachers do it all the time. It's just a matter of their practice. Others do it less. So I don't really know. I don't know if Roddy has any data point on that.
Yeah, Trustee Poppingy, you're actually asking a lot of really good questions that we are collecting quantitative data on right now. We administered a teacher survey this week on Monday that will close tomorrow. And right now we have about 300 responses, but it's very comprehensive. So it's asking for a snapshot of teacher perceptions of student social emotional wellness. They are actually, we only have about 300 responses, but from those responses, we see that and I'm pulling this off of memory, roughly 80% of students are demonstrating positive social emotional well-being from their point of view, but less than half of teachers are responding that they are experiencing their own social emotional wellness. So there's a big difference between teachers and students. Actually, I think it's around maybe 60%. But the important point is teachers are reporting a lot of stress, more than what they are observing in the students themselves. As for instruction and your question around recording videos, some of that is captured in the qualitative data that they are providing. We asked teachers to identify practices that they feel are best engaging their students at this point in the year in distance learning. And there are a variety of practices that they've been able to identify. And I think recording came up in their own additional comments. So we can look more specifically at that. We are, once the survey closes, we're going to begin analyzing and crunching the data next week and putting that into a presentation for our November 1st board meeting. So you're going to get a thorough overview of what teachers are experiencing and what they're saying. That presentation will also include an analysis of all the student focus group feedback. So what you were able to observe, a lot of that's being codified, or at least notes are being taken by principals. We're collecting all that data and we'll be synthesizing it for a presentation. So we can triangulate from a student perspective as well as a teacher perspective, how we're doing social emotionally, instructionally, and how we can best improve given what we've learned so far.
Yeah, just to comment on the focus group that I observed, I was really impressed by the teachers and their engagement in that process. So they were doing a great job. That's all I got.
Thank you, Trustee Papagay. Trustee Fernandez, your questions and comments, please.
So I just pick up on that last point, just sort of about this student engagement, and is our administrative staff kind of connecting frequently or regularly with teachers in the classroom just to get a sense of how things are going, whether it's auditing a class or, kind of listening in and connecting with them afterwards, just to make sure that, the decisions that we all are making are grounded in a sort of a regular and systematic check-in with not only the teachers, but just the students outside of the, the exercise we just had available for the trustees.
Yeah. Roddy, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, and the answer is yes, Trustee Fernandez. As you can imagine, everyone's role has been redefined in a lot of ways in terms of their best practices, and we see this with our teachers, but our principals and our vice principals are fundamentally changing their routines as well, because there's less in-person discipline and a lot of things are different now. So we have principals that are auditing classes. They have access to class Zoom links and are able to spot check, step in. And often it's, hey, it's Principal Boonchoy here checking in, how you all doing? And it's just a way to build community, but it's also for them to get a snapshot of progress, what instruction looks like, and also to take care of their teachers as well. Behind the scenes, principals are spending a lot of time making sure that teachers have the resources they need, helping mediate or mitigate any logistical or tech challenges they're facing. So there are a lot of supports in place that our administrators are providing, and that does include sitting in on classes.
And then is that same, principal, vice principal group connected back to the district office and you all, and kind of regularly reporting that interaction? Because I just, I think there's a concern, that we need to make sure that, while we're making decisions affecting that, we're not just flyby, but on a consistent basis, kind of having checks with people who are interacting directly with students and families.
Yeah. I mean, the question is there a strong feedback loop so that we can continually capture data and make adjustments? Yes. I mean, we meet with our principals as a team collectively every other week and have a structured agenda to, one, collect data and also continue update on all the continuing changes and to get a pulse on principals' observations and how those changes are, if those changes are actually going to be helpful, because they're closer than we are at the district office to what's happening with their teachers and students. We have more frequent one-on-one checks with principals and their directors to make sure those supports are in place. And then part of our, stakeholder outreach and ideation includes focused time with our principals. I think they probably have the best sense of what's happening at the governance level and are able to bridge it with the classroom level and have to translate a lot of the policies, expectations, and structures to their staff. And what they come back to us with is look, our teachers this week are exhausted. Please hold off on a communication with updates until next week. Like little things like that actually help us make progress with program development or revisions or asks that we're making of our staff. As the other way, there's a strong feedback loop is with our highly collaborative relationship with the Davis Teachers Association. And we meet weekly as well so that we can get a direct snapshot of what DTA reps at the sites are sharing with their leadership so that we can be in the know and intervene and support, resource as much as possible. So I think the answer is we're making the greatest effort we can, because without that feedback loop, we can't course correct. So that's part of our strategy.
Okay, I want to kind of pivot to the presentation and the part about sort of in-person instruction. And let's, we don't necessarily need to go back to the slide, but there's one slide in there that says sort of key things still yet to be done, so to speak. I can't remember the exact phraseology of the slide, but and specifically, I think we referenced assessments, the need for, those assessments. And so I thought, that Associate Superintendent Juanita said about October 12th or something being the date upon which we would start to conduct those assessments. And that's really kind of like the final step before then providing some actual in-person. Did I hear that correctly?
So next week we plan on scheduling, because we need to, obviously make sure parents want to come on campus with, bring their child on campus for the assessment. So we're going to start scheduling next week, have them start October 12th. We have a number that we're behind on, because as you can imagine, we haven't done any initials or triennials, or very few since the closure. So we'll be doing those and then getting services rolling. We're really using that as sort of our, I don't know if it's the toe in the pond, but it gets staff ready to start coming back. It's a small group. We're providing tremendous nursing support. And it gives us a chance to work out any kinks or any unintended things when we're still dealing with small groups. And then the idea is that very quickly we'll start doing the services that also, the PT, the OT, the things that are really hard to do distance. And then again, the idea is that we're working out the kinks. We're making sure that we've got all the policies and procedures down so that staff feel comfortable, parents feel comfortable, and then we'll be moving into bringing in the small cohorts, which are actual classes where students could potentially be there for their full day, but they'd be in a small group.
Okay, so it sounds based on your presentation fairly imminent that we would start to begin to offer in person for some of our most vulnerable student populations there, and that would qualify under waivers and the existing guidelines and rules. And that's good to hear. I know that I get feedback fairly regularly from a lot of different families, and I think there are some significant mental health concerns that is happening with some of the kids in this demographic, if you will. And I'm really concerned. I want to make sure that we're prioritizing and moving quickly there. Not to say, not to diminish the overall health consequences of coming back too quickly, because I want to kind of associate, myself with some broader comments we've already heard, which is, we have to make sure as far as the overall reopening, that is a much longer time frame for sure. But for this, I really want to kind of underscore the importance of the work that you're doing, and I appreciate it. The last thing I'd say really is I know too, the use of paras has, really been changed in some way. And I think that in short, cumulatively, it's less interaction and work that pairs have done as compared to if we were in full time. And I think that is putting stress on teachers in the classroom as well as our special education teachers. So the general ed teachers as well as the special education teachers. And so all of this to say that, I know we're aware of some of these issues and we're, keeping in close contact with DTA, which is vital. And I'm hopeful we'll be doing some things to help, alleviate some of that pressure. But I guess I would make this in the form of a request in the future. We often talk, in fact, we always talk about special education in the context of the overall restart. I am one, just as one trustee, really interested in pulling out special education and having just a focused topic on that from all different angles, from how we're phasing into and offering some in person to the effects of teachers and special education teachers, general ed teachers, and kind of an overall look at special education in general. And so I don't know, that's just one, I guess, like I said, call it a request that I'd like to pull that out and have a more focused discussion around that rather than in the overall context of, where our county stands and our trajectory on coming back in person. So with that was just the final request. Thanks for answering that. And I think that's all the comments or questions I have.
Thank you, Trustee Fernandez. Trustee Adams.
Well, first I want to thank my colleagues for asking a lot of the questions that I anticipated. The one thing I wanted to come back to is on these different steps, going from step 1, special education, in-person assessment, specialized services, and then step 3, small coherent classes. So what how long do we expect to go from step 1 to step 2, then from step 2 to step 3? And what's a good sense of how long this should take?
Well, I think when we first started thinking about this, we knew that we wanted to, frankly, do it right and do it at a speed that our staff felt comfortable, our parents felt comfortable. And so when we initially envisioned it, it was in sort of 2-week phases. We would do assessments for 2 weeks, then we'd start specialized services for 2 weeks, and then we would, assuming everything keeps going well and the numbers are low, then we would open up these small cohorts in 2 weeks. Some of the specialized services we can actually probably start very quickly, kind of almost at the same time as the assessments. We have a lot, we have things in place. It's a scheduling issue. That's a little bit of the tricky part. And then also just really getting in contact with every one of those families and assessing their comfort level in wanting to have their children come on campus. So we're ready to move. We've been, as Deputy Superintendent Matt Bess has said, we've been meeting with our labor groups and we're working towards that, and we're getting all the training in place. Director McGrew and I are meeting again with the psychologist tomorrow to kind of go over a little more the nitty-gritty of if we have to prioritize people the first week versus the second week, who are we going to prioritize, and how are we going to schedule? I mean, really getting down to all the minutia that's with this. And I think with anything, we're going to get better at the minutia and we'll get faster. So I expect the first week will be a little on the slow side, but the idea is really to be picking up steam and getting people the services that they need in person.
Okay. So the other thing is, I appreciate that, because a lot of it's going to depend upon personal interaction and availability of staff and resources, right? And we're trying to cover the entire district in this process, right? So So, you mentioned EAP, and I'm not sure everyone would know what that stands for. But before you go answer that, I was wondering if you or other staff could talk about what new supports we had to put in place, not just the increase in them, but what new supports we had to put in place for teachers, principals, and staff.
You want Matt Best to speak to the EAP? He probably has more of the details than I do.
Sure, I can do that. So EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program, and it's pretty common for employers to provide mental health services to employees. Our employees get 10 sessions per year, and they can extend those further if their therapist thinks that is an important part of them continuing to be healthy in the workplace. And after that 10, they only have a $30 copay moving forward until the therapist, until the provider feels that is no longer needed. And we also have done services for groups of employees. So we regularly have group sessions for counselors. We've had school sites that are struggling with either the conditions on campus or some trauma to have group sessions for staff as well. And then Laura, I don't know, you want to start on the things that are new, and I'm happy to jump in also.
Yeah, I think part of what we're doing is, I've talked about this before, the mental health collaborative, that it has a cross section of staff in the district that provide mental health services. I think the initial thought was it was all going to be spent on coming up with ideas for students, but in their very first meetings, they were identifying the stress that staff are under as well. And so we've been doing a lot of work with social emotional learning of staff and students. We had a number of teachers and counselors who got trained in mindfulness starting in the summer. And the first series of classes were all on your own mindfulness, your own ability to center yourself and sort of deal with everything that's hitting you. And then the next set of lessons, which they're in now, the second set of classes, is on how you translate your internal work to serving students. And so we've been working really hard, I think, to build up the toolkit for our teachers because we know they're carrying a lot of social emotional learning of their students. And I think what's even harder is they're carrying a lot of the unknown. It's like they know students are struggling, but they don't always have the details. It's very hard, as you've said, as you've seen, through a lens to be able to know who's having a really bad day versus other kids. One thing we're hearing from students and parents very regularly is that teachers are really reaching out to kids. They're there during office hours. They're making themselves available. They're responding to emails very quickly and really trying to be present, but that has a cost on them because they're kind of going 24/7. One thing we're looking at doing more this year is having some more group counseling at different sites. Like Matt said, we certainly did it at Chavez with the death of Senor Jopico, and we've done it some other sites. But I think, we're finding that just across the board, people need extra support. And some people are a lot more willing to do it in a group environment versus individual.
And I would also add, Tom, that part of the way we can better support staff in different ways is the manner by which we interact. So part of that is just acknowledging that this is a people business and do that as regularly and thoughtfully as you can, and that everybody's dealing with their own stuff every day. And being able to sort of attenuate yourself to that as a broader leadership team. The other, I think, is structural. And as Laura said, we've been meeting large groups of staff to sort of get ready for in-person instruction, and they have tons of questions. And in the in-person environment, the way those questions would be answered was it would essentially trickle down, right? If you needed an associate superintendent level person to answer the question, that would go to the director would tell the principal would convey it to staff. And what we're finding is that if we want to make deliberate and steady progress, we can't utilize that same method because everything takes longer. And in the meantime, the staff are carrying the burden of those unanswered questions along the way. So we're using a lot of Google Docs. You know, Laura and I have a series of them that we check every day, and staff put in new questions and we put in an answer and we date it. And so folks can use that as a place where they know somebody is sort of answering the questions that need answering. And I think that is a way you can sort of help folks offload a burden. I've got one going right now with Marcy and the tech staff about a whole slew of tech-related stuff, right? Because folks are having this whole paradigm shift in their instruction, and there's just a ton of technical questions that they need support on. And that also helps us carry things in a more collaborative way as a leadership team. And I would say the other thing is that when we were in real life, in person, we would have, the association would meet with employees, we would meet with employees, and then we would try to triangulate what we thought were the real issues, and then, work together independently to solve it. And I think one of the really powerful things that's happening right now is we're sitting in meetings together between management and the association. So we're here, we're listening for different things. We see solutions in different ways. And I think that's really helping us to address problems in a more root cause way, as opposed to a more bureaucratic or treating the symptoms sort of way. So I think, in addition to the just straight, this is how we're supporting the mental health of staff, I think we can also do that by, having and effective processes and, acknowledging that it's a people business.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, first of all, in terms of the teacher contact with student, I didn't mention earlier, I went to 3 different student focus groups, and the consistent comment they all had was they really liked the access to the teacher in terms of getting questions responded to or having office hours and being able to get a question addressed and explained by the teacher. So that is, I think Matt's right. This is a person-to-person business, and, ironically, social distancing has made teachers more accessible to students. But it definitely shows the professionalism of our own staff, as well as I think Matt's discussion about how everyone is coming together for solutions is great to hear. I really appreciate that. That's my comments and questions on this.
Thank you very much, Trustee Adams. I have a few, and then I will turn to our student representatives. Ms. Juanitas, let's start with you. So as we look at sort of moving from step 1, which, are the in-person assessments, to, step 2, we begin to provide services, and then step 3, starting to think about, bringing small cohorts up to 16 total back. On that last group, could you talk a little bit more? You sort of shared a little bit. Could you share a little bit more about what the nature, what we think at this moment, what the nature of those cohorts are? Who are these students likely to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's something we are still fine-tuning. Definitely a special day class of special education students is an obvious choice because they're already self-contained. They're not attending other classes, so it would be very easy. And those kids are, more likely to be having trouble with distance learning. But beyond that, I think this is where we get very creative, because we are a district of most of our special education students are mainstreamed in regular classes. And so it isn't like we've got all these little groups we could bring back. Part of our entire model of inclusion is that they're with their typically developing peers. So we have that value, we have that philosophy. But one of the things that we're thinking about is we could bring a cohort on campus and have them be in a room together, be with a teacher, have para support there, have EL support if it's an EL group, but they could still be enrolled in their distance learning classes. So they're not being given a different educational model than everybody, but they're being given the support that they need to be successful. And that model is, we've got some students that are dealing with homelessness or foster youth, so having them on campus where we have all these supports could be a really important way to serve these students. So I really think when we get to that part, there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 10. There's going to be different arms of students. We also have students, and we're still sort of ferreting all this out, is who really aren't engaging through distance learning. And although counselors are trying, administrators, teachers are trying to get to the root of it, sometimes you just need to get them in front of you. And then again, you could start to work on getting them re-engaged with their education. And again, probably they would still be in a distance learning class, but have the supports, maybe have almost like not a study hall, that's not the right word, but a support period added on where they can get extra help, but they're still progressing with their peers in those classes, but they're able to be in an environment that helps them to be successful. So we're seeing the same things, obviously, I think, with students that are brand new to learning English, having to do that in a distance learning format. I can't even imagine the hurdles. So that would be another group we would really want to focus on.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to hear that. And, I just encourage us, as you just suggested we will be, to keep an open mind about the kinds of students that are struggling in this environment and that we can help. And I know the district is being very good at looking at analogs, around the region, the state, and the country, and and seeing what models are being deployed and which are successful and that we can learn from, and which are cautionary tales. And there's several examples of districts that have successfully brought students that were struggling with distance learning onto campus, and they may not look like a traditional student that would be struggling, but just the very fact that they were on campus still in distance learning, but with some supervision helped them. So I do encourage us to keep an open mind about and be adaptable and flexible as to who we can help, and who needs that help. Sort of echoing one of the things that Trustee Adams said, I had the opportunity to listen to several of the focus groups, junior high and high school students, and we've already talked about this, but I want to probe a little bit deeper on this. One of the consistent messages, that when they were asked about their concerns, were less about academics. Most of them felt like the academic side was progressing pretty well. They were learning in the way that they expected. If they wanted to go deeper, they could. They were feeling maybe a little less stress academically than they might historically, and recognize it was 3 focus groups so far, so I don't want to, take the anecdote and extend it to quantitative analysis. But there was universal comment about feeling, really struggling with social engagement, and feeling not having the normal human interactions they have, with other students, and meeting new students and exploring things. And, I'd be curious and hope that our student representatives will talk a little bit about their personal experiences if they're comfortable doing that in a moment. But, the idea of clubs, as Mr. Lee said, that's a great, kind of next step to find your, the people you want to engage with and do that. Are there things we've learned in the, 4 or 5 weeks that we've, had school going, that suggest there are steps we can take to help further promote and support that social engagement?
Yeah, I know in my talking with principals, I'm hearing some very creative ways of engaging students. So, for example, Jean Kennedy was telling us at Holmes, they are having a time they open up a Zoom call at lunch and kids can join, and it gives them an opportunity to just be able to talk back and forth without it necessarily being academic. And, you know, they have a staff member there to supervise, but not to run an agenda, not to dictate, but allow students to have that. We're also hearing of other teachers who, you know, they'll end their class a few minutes early and say, okay, I'm going to give you guys a chance to talk and interact with each other. So, and then we've got families that have been really creative on their own in creating their own little micro groups, sometimes in person, but also other times just their own little Zoom groups, so that kids are actually able to do homework together, be able to talk. I mean, we are social beings, and especially for the kids that maybe are not as outgoing and not as easy for them to make those connections, it's got to be very, very difficult. I was being interviewed by the Hub this morning, and they were asking some of those questions. And we talked about, you know, imagine if you were brand new to Davis and you don't know anybody and you can't do the normal clubs and sports and things that generally helps people to start to connect. And so I know elementary counselors are having friendship groups now as ways to, and as well as the junior highs, because they've got all these new 7th graders who some are, you know, they're not used to having all these different classmates and bigger classes and more classes. And it certainly helped only having the 3 courses. That has been, I think, very appreciative by students, but it's hard for kids right now. It really is. And I think also just because it's gone on for so long.
Yeah, well, I just want to encourage us again to and I know we are, this is meant as an affirmation, not a cautionary statement, that we continue to focus on that and looking for ways to be creative and in providing those moments of human connection, you know, for our students. And I agree, new students, you know, particularly the transition students, you know, going to junior high in your first year, you know, after 4, 5, 6, 7 years with the same cohort in elementary, you know, it's something that, you know, you find the place where you feel like you belong, you know, as a student, you know, whether it's a club or a class or a few of your best friends or whatever. And those are so important to dealing with, you know, just the normal craziness without COVID of being a junior high or high school student. So, you know, let's keep up the effort to listen and be thoughtful. And to that point, Dr. Pointer, you mentioned that we will have some survey results toward the end of this month that will be presented at the November meeting. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. A lot of the questions you're asking right now, the last handful on social emotional wellness, teacher perspectives, how students are doing, will be presented at the November 5th board meeting. And we'll be able to actually quantify some of these hunches that we're feeling right now. So, for example, teachers that when they rate the cause of any challenges to student social emotional well-being, number 1 is isolation of students, 2, uncertainty about the future. And then there are things like academic rigor. The other things that are coming up that we all need to be aware of, particularly for teachers, is one around expectations for distance learning. Our teachers have so much integrity right now that the expectations are self-imposed right now. They believe so much in the quality of their instruction. And we're hearing this from principals too, that teachers are really doing the best they can, working above and beyond because they want to do a good job. So that's there. But the other one is political unrest in this country. That came in at, I don't know, one of the top 3. So that's in the air. There's so many factors and variables in our environment that are causing trauma and stress for staff, students, and our community at large, honestly. So I think the more data we gather, the better we can direct our resources and our attention to support everyone. And again, I think we rest on that quote from Margaret Wheatley that we talked about back in the spring, and that is, in order for us to get through times of uncertainty, we have to attend to our relationships. And that's actually how we get to quality learning experiences and, quality operation as a school district organization.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I just encourage us to, to also balance. For example, I would love to see, and I'm sure my colleagues would, the sort of early results from that information. I know you always want to present the best foot and have the, the data collected properly and analyzed properly. But, sometimes when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm going to use my entrepreneurial hammer for just a moment and say that some of what we have to do here is likely to be a little bit more rapid response than we might historically do if we notice trends, because of what you just said about the dramatic effects, the uncertainty, and the very, very different environment, to say, hey, we've noticed that. Is there a way we can deal with it, relatively quickly in an agile way? And I recognize, we're educating 8,400 students. We have 1,000 employees. This is, this isn't a startup, but I do think some of that philosophy, can apply here, and we can kind of rapidly respond, which it sounds like a lot of the teachers and the administrators, the principals, are already doing. So just two more brief things. The first one is, back to Laura, to Ms. Juanitas. So as we go through these steps 1, 2, and 3, I just encourage us to look at what resources we need to make sure that process goes well, and then the broader expansion goes well. And I'll just give you one example that I know I brought up before, and you had a very eloquent answer previously, and that is around nurses. And we all live in a world of, budget limitations and all the challenges that comes with underfunded public education in this state and this country. And we understand that, and we've learned how to do our best to adapt to that. But I'd encourage us, if we learn that more nursing resources are really important for us to be able to open safely and comfortably, or more counseling resources, or whatever it might be, that we're open-minded to recognizing the reality of that and then figuring out how to deal with it budgetarily or whatever. I'm confident in saying I can represent my colleagues on the board and say, if you come to us and say, we need this to make this work well, we'll work together to figure it out. And I think it's just important for us to maybe have a bit of a paradigm shift from limited resources, and that's all we got, which is the reality. I'm fairly budgetarily, fiscally conservative, but I think we just need to be open-minded to that. And I'm just using nurses as one example. Does that make sense? Was that even remotely articulate?
Oh, it definitely makes sense. And our nurses have just been phenomenal in the extra hours they're putting in, and the combing through reports throughout the country, different nursing reports and best practices. And we had a very good representation of nurses on the action team this summer that I chaired, and they have continued to help with the protocols, refine them. When we said we were going to start this phase of step 1, step 2, step 3, which they have an incredibly important role, they were, okay, we're ready. And they've been, and they're also, what I tease them about too, is I say, you need to be the calmest people in the room, because you've got a lot of nervous people. You got nervous parents, we've got nervous staff, and they're going to come to you, and you're going to be truthful, but you got to be calm. And they've just done a phenomenal job with that. And I think it really helps as a district. It's hard to get nurses. That's the reality in a school environment. School nurse salary is nowhere near what they can get in the private sector in this day and age. So when I was faced with when I started as director and couldn't find nurses, I started trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to start recruiting DJUSD parents who are nurses, who want to work part-time, who want to be in the district that their kids are. And I can't pay them what they can get in the private sector, but I can give them, help them to be able to make their kids' district what they want it to be. And, we have 14 nurses and LVNs and 9 nurses for only 5 full-time positions. So all but one work part-time. And, but they're consistent, they're dedicated, and we definitely get incredible value for the money. And we would like more. It's hard, even if we wanted to advertise today for more nurses, it's hard to find them. They are gold in this community, and they're hard to get, but we've done a really good job getting our parents who are nurses. So.
Yeah, I just want to encourage, thank you for that. And I understand. And as I said, I was picking, nurses as one example. My mom was a nurse. I agree with you about the calmness. Just imagine what it was like to deal with me when I was growing up. A terror that my children are attempting to match, but have yet to achieve. But I do think that the novel situations require novel thinking sometimes. And so let's just keep an open mind about what we need to do to keep our teachers and our students safe, what resources we need, what steps we need to take. And if it's not, the old paradigm, then we'll figure out a new one. Okay, I've gone on long enough. I want to hear from our student trustees. So if we could hear first from Mr. Lee.
Yeah, I guess building off of what Mr. D'Annunzio was saying, I think that's really necessary to find student voices when we're determining the best things or the most helpful things that we can do for mental health. I know that there are a wide variety of different kids at my school, and I have a lot of very different classmates that are struggling with their own social issues. And so I don't really think that I would be doing them justice by giving just my own account. So I and student government will be conducting our own survey next week that will gauge the interest and effectiveness of possible mental health projects like presentations, discussions, or support groups. I'm hoping that these surveys will be able to provide direction for the kinds of projects that would be successful or be desired by different students. I definitely don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all solution for mental health. And I know that it will be very important to be able to try many different things, like keeping an open mind to trying possibly multiple at the same time. I know that Mr. Rohde will also be conducting a comprehensive survey of a similar nature. So maybe it would be possible for us to collaborate and maybe combine results to paint a larger picture of what the state of my classmates' mental health is right now. I also had one question. In the earlier steps of the learning continuity plan, I think it was mentioned that the district would be prioritizing students with special educational needs, possibly difficulties with technology or mental health concerns with online classrooms. Outside of the people that are already enrolled in special education, how would the district identify or determine the students that have mental health issues and that require individualized or in-person services? Would there be maybe a way for students to reach out to the school themselves, or a way to contact the people that are organizing the mental health projects?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One way that we instituted last spring was there is a mental health referral form that students can access. It's right on our website, so they can self-refer, and we've been getting some students who self-refer. But again, I think a lot of times mental health, especially in a distance environment, a lot of times you see issues through engagement. So a student who is not doing well in class or not showing up to classes or not turning their camera on or speaking up, those can all be clues that there are issues going on. And so we are going to be, asking those questions and really following up on those students so that, like you said, it isn't a one size fits all. It's not always obvious. So our counselors are going to be working on that. Our managers of prevention and wellness have already been doing that work. Kate Snow in climate has been doing that work as well. So we are all going to be really looking to find the kids that really do need to come back sooner rather than later.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Ortega-Nunez, your comments and questions, please.
I have a younger brother who's in junior high, and I have a little bit of an insight of what's going on in there. And I think they're doing fine, but he's a 7th grader, so communicating with other students might be a little bit difficult because some of them might not have a phone or a way to contact each other outside of school. And so I don't see him engaging with friends in his class. Well, he does in small groups, but outside of class, he doesn't engage with new people. He does speak with his old friends from elementary school that he already had contact with. So I think that might be the issue going on there, that younger students don't have access to their own devices to contact other people. And in the high school, honestly, in my experience, I don't know about others yet. I will ask them for sure. But Da Vinci is really unique because I've known most of the students in 7th grade. So I've been with them for 5 years now, and it's easy to communicate with them. So I don't feel left out. And we do have a few new students, but they came from Davis High, I believe so, or they were older students that had already been at Da Vinci, and they already had friends at Da Vinci. So I think they're doing really good. I see them engaging in class, so I assume that they can engage with others as well. And I did have a question about the presentation. This was probably already thought about, but I was wondering, when will you decide when a student is putting themselves and others at risk? Because at school we have rules, of course, and let's say, for example, in class they say don't use your phone. You get a warning, and you get a first warning, and they don't take your phone. The second one, the teacher takes your phone, and then the third, they decide that it's a bigger issue and they contact your parents and it goes to the office. This is a sensitive case, of course, and I was wondering, when will you decide that the privilege of being at school will be, I guess, taken away? Because I understand that it's younger students that will be going, and knowing about consequences might be still a new thing for them. But I guess that doesn't really matter because as Trustee Popengay has brought up, we see older students and they're not following the procedures to keep themselves safe and others. So that's my question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it is definitely something I think I heard a lot last spring from teachers when they were just even predicting opening up. What happens if students don't wear a mask? What happens if they won't social distance? So there was a lot of worry about that. I think that a lot of those worries have lessened in recent months because wearing masks when you're out in public has become the norm. And frankly, we are going to be insisting that people wear masks unless there's some identified, confidential reason that they can't. And there will always be a distance learning option for people. So if somebody really feels that they couldn't do that, there is a distance learning option. But I think we have to all, we have to look out for each other, and we have to also call each other on that. And I know I have staff do that, to me. I will have staff call me up about some situation where people aren't wearing masks. And so, I think we all want to take care of each other's health, and it's just going to have to be something that we really instill in everybody. And I've actually heard from daycare providers who are dealing with very young kids, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. They said those kids are actually better at wearing their masks and complain less than most adults. So, again, it's becoming the norm, sad to say, but it is becoming accepted. And, of course, it's going to take reminding people, but I think most people really do understand that masks are going to be what's going to get us back to school and keep people healthy.
Great, thank you. Also, I'm not sure if this was already brought up before, but when we go back to school, will the schedule change? Will we have more than 3 classes or less? And also about what Trustee Popengay brought up as well, about making sure that we don't have cases happening by testing us weekly. Would we have to add a specific time for that, making the day longer? Or would we have to, I don't know what to do with that so we can be tested weekly if that becomes a thing?
This is all very helpful and the sort of questions that help inform our decision-making process. So those are both questions we'll take down and to be determined. But keep thinking about those type of questions, because while as a group, we know we're a lot smarter collectively than we are individually. The reason we go out for student focus groups, and we've done so many iterations of surveys, is we know we make better decisions when we're hearing from many more people. So likewise, to the community, if you have questions, please, send those our way along with your ideas.
Thank you. I also had another question or comment, but I understand that there are some parents out there with old-fashioned thoughts or beliefs about mental issues. And if we are going to be taking care of or bringing more attention to those students who might have those issues and might need more help, but what happens if they themselves are not aware of it, or they can't find a way to speak to others about that?
Well, our counseling staff they spend a lot of time talking to parents and helping to be that bridge sometimes that students need about mental health issues. And also, I think too, if we can provide a positive mental health experience for a student that the parent can then witness, even if it's short term, it gives them that knowledge that there really is help out there, and that these things, that it really does work. So I think those are, that is something we've been trying to break down those barriers for a long time, and we will continue. And a lot of parents, it's more, there needs to be more information, and we do our best to really make sure that's provided.
Thank you. That was all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega-Nunez. And I just want to say two things, and then we'll move on to our next item. The first is we're so grateful to have our student representatives. We appreciate the time and energy you put into this, in addition to all the other things you have to do and in the environment that we're in. Strongly encourage you to continue to express your voice like you have. It really helps inform the decision-making process, and you bring a perspective that at the end of the day, we exist as a school district to serve our students. And so thank you for that. And then I just want to echo what the superintendent said to the community. I know this is an issue of great interest to all parents and all of our community. Schools are a vital part of our community, and it's so critical that we make thoughtful decisions to serve all of our students. And we appreciate the feedback that you share with us. Again, we read everything, we try to process everything, we try to respond to everything. So we're grateful for your engagement, and candidly, again, frustrated that we can't do this in chambers and the normal hearing you speak to us and having the kind of dialogue we do. It's